Welcome to Reaper's Creepers. Step into the shadows, where tales of the unknown unfold. Relax, listen, and drift into the dark. Today's story was written by Pennyworth223. You can find their information in the description and pinned comment below. Let's begin. My name's Rook. Someone else can tell you about Tokyo. Kane's story isn't mine to tell. And besides, I'm not ready to talk about what I saw there. Not yet. It's been a few weeks since Site 82. Long enough for the nightmares to settle into something like routine. Long enough for Command to hand me another live operation. This time, it's Rhode Island. Sounds harmless enough if you've never seen what the division stamps as Apex Class. We're hunting 2 targets tonight. One is a confirmed Apex cryptid. No name yet, no visual confirmation. Just a string of missing persons spread across 30 years, always clustered around the same stretch of coastline forest. The other is human, at least by the paperwork, a priest, or maybe just wearing the skin of one. Intel says he's tied to a new cult we haven't tagged yet. Not Azaral's people, not any of the old gods we've mapped. New banners, new rituals. And he's been seen walking the tree line near the disappearances like he's checking the perimeter of his church. The church is deep in the coastal forest, too far for regular patrols, close enough to the cliff edge that you can hear the ocean pounding below. Locals don't go near it. They say it's been abandoned since the 70s, but the satellite still shows a lit steeple every 3rd night. That's where we're going. The team's not quite the same as before. Lynn's with me. There was never a question about that. Wild's still our tech lead, though he's quieter now. And then there's our new addition, Agent Delta. That's not his real name, but no one's gotten anything else out of him. He's tall, speaks like he's been trained not to, and carries himself like he's waiting for someone to give him permission to breathe. His record's redacted in places I didn't know the division could redact. Whatever's in there, Command trusts him enough to put him under my command, so I'll trust him too. We're all carrying division-grade rifles this time. No standard issue. Each one's fitted with smart optics, anti-armor rounds, and a fail-safe mode that burns the weapon to slag if it's taken from us. You don't bring hardware like this unless you're expecting to need it. The approach is quiet, too quiet, even for Rhode Island's winter coast. No gulls, no wind, just the constant thud of the surf far below. The forest is wet, old, the kind where the bark smells like salt and rot. Every step feels like it sinks into the ground more than it should. Through the trees, the church looks wrong. The steeple is bent just enough to make your brain itch, like a bad drawing of a straight line. The windows glow faintly, not yellow, not white, something in between, like moonlight coming from the wrong direction. The doors are shut, but I can see movement through the cracks. Delta stops and tilts his head like he's hearing something we can't. "There's someone inside," he says. "More than one." Wild glances at me. Lynn checks her safety. We're 30 meters out when the glow in the windows shifts, like whatever's inside just realized we're here. The forest goes still. Even the ocean stops sounding like the ocean. We slid off the direct path, fanning left into the deeper tree line. The forest thickened fast, roots curling like the backs of sleeping animals, branches clawing the damp night air. Delta took point without me asking, his rifle steady, movement deliberate. Lynn and Wild stayed in the middle, scanning the gaps between the trees for anything big enough to matter. The ocean grew louder the closer we got to the cliffside, its rhythm off somehow, like the waves weren't hitting rock, but something softer. The ground tilted, and the smell hit, salt, brine, and copper. Too much copper. We found a rise overlooking the church's rear wall. From here, the steeple's bend looked worse, almost as if it had been pulled toward the cliff. Delta froze, lifted one hand. He motioned us down. Through the warped windows we saw him, the priest, tall, thin, face hidden under a hood that hung too low for the light to touch. His robes weren't the black or white you expect. They were a deep, wet green, like kelp dragged from the bottom of the ocean. Symbols were stitched across the hem, jagged and looping, unfamiliar even to Division's broad-spectrum pattern library. He wasn't alone. A man knelt in front of him, bare-chested, head bowed, arms bound behind him with rope that looked slick. His chest was already marked with a single vertical line, deep enough to bead red. The priest raised a long, curved blade, the kind made for one purpose. He chanted, voice low, rhythm deliberate, each word ending in a wet click. I couldn't make out the language, but the tone was worship, not threat. Then he cut. One swift motion, parting flesh like it wasn't flesh at all. The bound man gasped once, then went still. The priest's hands moved quickly, expertly, reaching inside with a surgeon's familiarity. When they came out, they held a heart, still warm, still pumping, the last beats twitching in his palm. He turned toward the altar at the far end of the church. It wasn't a cross. It was a sculpture, half woman, half serpent, her lower body spiraling into waves carved from some kind of black coral. Her head was tilted back, mouth open as if singing or screaming. The priest knelt, lifted the heart above his head, and began chanting faster. The language broke into something deeper, wetter, like the sound of water rushing into a drowned room. Below us, the surf slammed the cliffside, harder, louder, and something answered. The sound wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was too deep, too slow, and it rolled under the ground like it had come from beneath the ocean floor. Lynn whispered, "That's not just a cryptid." Delta didn't take his eyes off the priest. "No," he said. "That's something older." I tapped my comm twice, short burst to Lynn and Wild. "Hold position," I said quietly. "Eyes on the rear. If he runs, drop him." No hesitation from either of them. Lynn's voice came back low and sharp. "Copy." Delta and I broke from the tree line, moving fast and low. The ground was wet beneath us, not with rain, but with something colder, thicker, that clung to our boots. The closer we got to the church, the more the air felt wrong, like breathing through gauze soaked in salt water. The chanting inside grew louder. The priest's voice was rising in pitch now, trembling, almost ecstatic. The ocean's rhythm matched it, waves pounding harder against the cliff. The sound wasn't water anymore. It was something hitting from the other side. We reached the side door, a weathered slab of wood with hinges eaten to rust. Delta tried the handle. Locked. He gave me a look. I nodded. One sharp kick and the frame splintered. The smell that rolled out hit like a wave. Brine, blood, and rot so deep it crawled down the back of my throat. We stepped in. The priest didn't turn. His hooded head was tilted back, the heart still raised above him. He was speaking faster now, the words breaking apart into gasps between syllables. The statue of the ocean goddess loomed ahead, its black coral gleaming like wet bone. I could swear the mouth had opened wider than it had when I saw it through the window. "Stop," I called out, rifle leveled. My voice sounded too small in here. "Drop it, now." No reaction. Delta stepped forward, his tone lower, firmer. "You're calling something you can't control." That made the priest pause, just for a moment. His head turned slightly, enough for us to see the faint glint of pale skin beneath the hood. It's not about control, he said. His voice was wrong, too smooth, too calm. It's about returning. The floor trembled under us, faint at first, then stronger. Not like an earthquake, like something massive was pushing against the ground from below. Over comms, Lynn's voice cut in, tight, urgent. Rook, something's coming out of the water. Delta's eyes flicked toward me. The priest lowered the heart toward the statue's mouth, a single drop of blood hitting the coral. It hissed like acid on metal. The waves outside didn't sound like waves anymore. They sounded like breathing. And it was getting closer. I moved before I had time to think. Delta was already stepping in to cut the angle, rifle up, keeping the priest's attention. I slung mine over my shoulder and lunged forward, grabbing the robed figure by the front of his kelp-colored garment. He tried to turn toward the statue, but I drove him back hard, slamming him into the cold stone wall beside the altar. The heart tumbled from his hands, hitting the floor with a wet slap. I planted a knee into his chest and pressed him there. "Ritual's over," I said. "You're coming with us." The priest's mouth curled into something that might have been a smile or a spasm. His voice came out in a whisper that scraped like dry coral. "She's already here." I yanked his hood back. His skin was slick, too pale, like something that had been underwater too long. Eyes the color of deep tide pools locked on mine, unblinking. Delta produced restraints and snapped them onto the priest's wrists, forcing his arms behind his back. I was about to secure his ankles when the rear door burst inward. Lynn and Wild, weapons drawn, breathing hard. I shot them a look that could have drilled holes through concrete. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Hold the tree line." Wild cut me off, voice high with adrenaline. "Forget the tree line. Rook, you need to see this." And then the wall exploded. Not the altar wall. The side of the building, just left of the steeple's bent shadow. Stone, wood, and shards of stained glass sprayed the room like shrapnel. As something massive pushed through. It was the statue. No, it was her, half woman, half serpent. The same form, carved into the altar but alive, scaled in black-green plates that shimmered like oil on water. Her upper body was human enough to unsettle, skin pale and glistening, hair slick and trailing down her back like strands of kelp. But where the statue's mouth had been carved open in frozen song, hers moved, and she screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It wasn't even animal. It was the tearing of the tide itself, the groan of deep ocean trenches collapsing. The air in the church vibrated with it. My teeth ached, and my vision wavered like I was looking through water. The priest laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. Delta shoved him to the ground and turned his rifle on the creature. Lynn and Wild spread out instinctively, flanking, but every instinct in my body screamed that the thing in front of us didn't care about bullets. It was looking at me. Her mouth closed, the echo of that screech still ringing in the shattered air, and then she spoke. "Return what is mine." I kept my rifle leveled, but didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. "What's yours?" I shouted over the ringing in my ears, keeping my eyes locked on hers. Every part of me wanted to look away, but there was something in the way she held that gaze, like the deep pressure of the ocean pinning you to the seafloor. Her serpent tail coiled through the breach, scales scraping stone. The air smelled heavier now, salt and iron mixing until it was hard to breathe. "The heart," she said, voice thick, dragging over the syllables like they were barnacle encrusted. "The heart that binds the way. Give it, and the tide will not rise." The priest laughed from where Delta had him pinned. "She doesn't bargain division, she warns." That was enough. I squeezed the trigger. The first volley hit center mass, armor-piercing division-grade rounds punching into her chest and shoulders. Each impact burst with a spray of something blacker than ink evaporating before it hit the floor. Delta joined in a second later, his rifle's controlled bursts keeping her head pinned back. She didn't fall. She didn't even stumble. Her scream came again, sharper this time, directed. The glass shards on the floor shook, splitting into smaller pieces. My visor's HUD flickered, warning glyphs flashing across the display. Wild cursed over comms. Lynn was already adjusting her aim to target the eyes, or where the eyes should have been. "Suppress," I barked. "Delta, keep her off us. Lynn, Wild, find cover and move." The creature's upper body twisted in ways a spine shouldn't. She surged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed, knocking over pews like driftwood. The tail lashed out and smashed through the altar, sending splinters and black coral shards across the floor. I kept firing, each shot aimed for a joint, a weak point, anything that might slow her. It was like shooting the tide itself. "Rook," Lynn's voice was sharp in my comm. "We've got movement outside, more than one." I didn't have to ask what kind. The ocean had stopped sounding like water again. Now it was footsteps, hundreds of them. "Delta, with me, Lynn, Wild, take the priest and move." No hesitation. Lynn hauled the priest to his feet, Wild keeping his rifle on the man's spine as they half-dragged him toward the breach. The priest was still laughing under his breath, even as they shoved him forward, his eyes locked on the creature, like she was some long-lost lover. Delta and I shifted, stepping wide to keep her focus. Her head tracked us instantly, mouth curling into something that might have been a grin. That wasn't a human expression. It was too wide, too knowing. "Little tides," she hissed, trying to dam the ocean. The tail lashed again, smashing a hole into the far wall. Cold air poured in with a heavy scent. Kelp, rotting fish, and something else. Something coppery and sweet that set every alarm bell in my head ringing. Outside, the footsteps grew louder. Not marching, not running, just approaching in perfect unison. Delta's breathing tightened in the calm. "We don't have long." "Keep her on us," I said. "Don't let her turn." I stepped left, forcing her to adjust, keeping her body between me and Lynn's retreat. Her eyes, or whatever was behind them, never blinked, but there was a subtle twitch when Delta put a 3-round burst into the joint where her human torso met the serpent coil. Black fluid hissed and steamed across the floorboards. She hissed, not in pain, but in warning. And then, from the breach, something else hissed back. Figures moved at the tree line. Not men, not even close. Their shapes were wrong, like bodies seen underwater. Limbs bending the wrong way, skin pale under the moonlight. Their eyes caught the faint glow from inside the church, reflecting it like a predator's in the dark. "Rook!" Lynn's voice came through, strained, urgent. "They're surrounding us." The creature's head tilted sharply at her voice. She took one slow step forward. Tail, scraping over the stone and leaving deep grooves. Delta put another burst into her upper shoulder. "Stay on me, you sea witch," he muttered. Her gaze swung back to him, but she smiled wider. "The tide is patient. The tide does not forget." And then she moved. Not a lunge, more like a collapse. Her whole upper body melting toward us, arms elongating, fingers ending in hooked black talons. The ground shook under the weight of her tail as it coiled, ready to strike. Behind her, more of those pale shapes were stepping into the open, closing in on the breach Lynn and Wild had just used. We were seconds away from being trapped inside with her. "Delta, run!" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, rifle still up, eyes locked on the thing as if willing it to stay put. But I didn't give him the chance to argue. I was already yanking a flashbang from my pouch. The pin came free with a sharp, metallic snap, the grenade cold and solid in my hand. The creature's gaze shifted to me instantly. It knew something was coming. "Move!" I barked, and Delta bolted toward the breach. The pale figures outside had almost reached it, their movements jerky, like puppets pulled through shallow water. I thumbed the safety off the flashbang and let it roll from my palm, right at the base of her coiled tail. She hissed in a language my ears didn't understand, but my bones did. Then the world went white. The blast was more than sound and light. It was pressure, a sharp spike in the air that made the church groan in protest. I threw myself behind the half-shattered altar, teeth rattling, ears screaming with the ringing aftermath. Her screech cut through it all, raw, furious, full of something that wasn't pain so much as insult. The coil of her body slammed against the wall, splintering wood and stone alike. I pushed off the altar and ran for the breach, boots slipping on wet floorboards. The cold outside hit like a slap, the scent of brine and rot even stronger in the open air. Delta was up ahead, covering Lynn and Wild as they forced the priest toward the tree line. The pale shapes were reeling from the flashbang too, their heads twitching violently, movements stuttering. "Go, go, go," I shouted, falling into step behind them. The sound of pursuit followed, tails smashing through pews, claws gouging stone. She was coming, even, blinded. And somewhere behind that roar, under the crash of the ocean and the pounding in my ears, I thought I heard the priest start to sing. "Wild," I shouted over the wind and the pounding surf. "Get Carter on comms, now!" We were still moving, boots hammering over wet earth as the ruined church and its shattered breach faded into the trees behind us. The flashbang's afterimage still burned in my vision, but I could hear her tail smashing through debris, hunting us by sound. Wild's voice cracked through comms, breathless. "Director, this is Wild. Team Rook. Apex class contact. Engaged in ritual with hostile human. Multiple secondary hostiles in play. We need immediate extraction and reinforcement." Carter's voice came back cold, controlled. "Extraction's a no-go right now. Weather and interference have the skies locked. But if you can survive for 15 minutes, I can get 19C to you." Delta glanced back at me, rifle still sweeping the tree line. 15 minutes is a long time with her on our heels. "Then we make it 15, I said. We broke from the tree line, the ocean vanishing behind us, replaced by the skeletal outlines of the coastal town. Dark, narrow streets. Salt-stained clapboard houses, most empty, some boarded up. The air here was different, stale and unmoving, like it hadn't been stirred in years. Lynn shoved the priest forward, his wrists still bound. "You brought her here," she hissed at him. He didn't answer, just kept walking, head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something none of us could hear. We stuck to the main road for speed, every shadow feeling like it had teeth. My internal clock said we'd made good distance. Between the flashbang, the collapsing wall, and the maze of trees, we should have bought ourselves breathing room. "Plan?" Wild asked, keeping his rifle trained on the rooftops. "We buy time," I said. "We make her chase us where she can't use that tail to full advantage. Tight streets, blind corners." "And the pale ones?" Delta asked. "We keep the priest alive. If they're with her, maybe she'll hesitate to risk hitting him." Lynn gave me a sharp look. "And if they're not, then he's the only thing keeping us from not knowing why they're here at all." We passed a rusted sign pointing toward the harbor. The town felt dead, but every creak of wood and distant groan of the tide kept the tension wired tight in my chest. I could feel the team thinking the same thing I was. If she had followed, we'd know by now. We were wrong. Somewhere in the distance, too far to place, the ocean screamed again. "The cannery," I said. "Edge of town. Narrow lines, reinforced walls. She can't coil in there without bottlenecking herself." Delta gave a quick nod. Lynn didn't argue. Wild kept his rifle on the priest, but fell in line. The streets closed in around us as we cut toward the far end of town. Street lamps were dead, every window black, the only light a faint glow from the overcast sky. The smell of salt and rust got heavier with every block. The cannery was close. We'd made it maybe 3 blocks before the first of the pale ones stepped out. It came from between 2 warped houses, moving with that wrong, drifting gait. Its skin was stretched so thin I could see the muscles shifting underneath. Its head lolled slightly to the side as it fixed those reflective eyes on us. "Contact! Left!" Lynn called, already putting 2 rounds into its chest. The thing didn't go down, but it staggered, fluid spilling in thick ropes from the wounds. 2 more emerged from a side alley. "Delta, right flank," I barked, and he peeled off, his rifle chattering in short, brutal bursts. One of the creatures spun from the impact, losing an arm but still coming. The priest was muttering something now, not quite chanting, but close. Soft syllables, shaped like the words we'd heard in the church. Wild slammed him into a wall as we passed, just hard enough to cut him off. "Shut it," Wild snarled. We pushed on, firing in controlled bursts, leapfrogging between cover. 10 minutes to hold out felt like a lifetime. One of the pale ones lunged from a doorway ahead, forcing me to bring my rifle up fast. 3 shots. Neck, jaw, chest. Dropped it. But not before its nails raked down my forearm guard. I felt the scrape, even through the armor, like ice biting bone. Lynn called another contact from the rooftops. One of them was crawling along the shingles, movements jerky and fast. Delta tagged it mid-sprint, sending it tumbling into the street. The cannery's silhouette finally came into view. 3 stories of weathered concrete and corrugated steel, sitting at the water's edge like it had been waiting for us. The massive sliding doors were rusted but half open, enough for us to squeeze through. "Inside," I ordered. From Reaper's creepers, the unknown retreats and the shadows release you for now. Join us again to drift deeper into the dark.